Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. I haven't done a video version of the Big Blue View mailbag for a while, and I thought this week, with a little bit of a backlog of similar questions to the Big Blue View inbox, I thought this week that we would take the opportunity to do that. Just a reminder: if you have questions for the mailbag, the best way to get them to me is to email them to bigblueview@gmail.com. You can also drop them into the @bigblueview account on X if you want to do that, or you can drop them to me over on my account at Blue Sky, the Ed Valentine Blue Sky account. So you can send them over there as well. But the best way to do it is to email them to bigblueview@gmail.com. That's the easiest way for me to track them. So do that if you have questions. I'd rather have you send me a question than complain about the quality of the questions that we do get, which happens sometimes in the comments in our weekly mailbag on Saturday. So you don't like the questions that are being asked, then send us one of your own. Anyway, let's get to some of the questions this week that won't be included in the print version of the mailbag, which will appear on bigblueview.com on Saturday morning as usual. All right, our first question from David Cantor. David says, Tiki Barber went on WFAN this week saying the Giants shouldn't draft a quarterback because the situation isn't good enough for a young quarterback to succeed in. Quarterback aside, is this one of the better offensive rosters the Giants have had in a while? Serviceable offensive line, decent wide receivers, solid running back, promising tight end. David, I don't disagree with that assessment. I'm not sure that I agree with Tiki Barber's logic here. Look, assess the Giants' offensive roster, and the Giants, by and large, to this point, entering the draft, other than quarterback, what they've done more or less is bring back the same group that they had in 2024. I'm not sure that was the plan entering the offseason, but because they couldn't find a free agent guard to their liking, the prices were really, really high. Will Freeze got, I think, 5 years and $88 million. That's crazy money. Barely any free agents nowadays get more than 3-year deals. So that's a massive long deal for Freeze from, I believe, the Minnesota Vikings. And I know he was a target for the Giants. The Giants ended up settling for bringing back Greg Van Roten, who played very well for them a year ago, and bringing back backup guard Aaron Stinney. So we'll see how that works out. I would expect the Giants to add a guard in the upcoming NFL draft, perhaps on day 2 or at the latest early on day 3. But David, back to your question. The offensive line is adequate provided Andrew Thomas is healthy. Until Thomas got hurt last year, and then there were other injuries on the offensive line, guys being shuffled around, guys coming in off the street basically and trying to play. This offensive line is good enough if it's healthy. And I think the Giants did do a good thing this year, this offseason, signing James Hudson III, signing Stone Forsythe, guys who have experience as swing tackles, so they're better prepared in the event of injury at the tackle position. Look, any team that loses an all-pro caliber left tackle is going to face a huge challenge on their offensive line, but the Giants enter 2025 better prepared to face that situation. And as I said, I think they'll be adding to the guard rotation in the draft. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe that would be a day 2 pick. Maybe it's a second round pick. Maybe it's a guy that would compete to start. We'll have to see. But I think entering the season, if they have reasonably good health, they're fine on the offensive line for 2025. At wide receiver, I think I would say better than decent at wide receiver, because you have Malik Neighbors, who's one of the top 5 to 7 wide receivers in the league. He was that as a rookie. He'll be that, if not better, as a second-year player, especially with a quarterback like Russell Wilson and a backup quarterback like Jameis Winston, guys who have the ability to get the ball down the field, both the ability and the willingness to get the ball down the field. Darius Slayton is back, somewhat surprisingly. Good player. Wan'Dale Robinson, good player that I don't think the Giants have taken full advantage of. Giants still have Jalen Hyatt. They brought in Lil Jordan Humphrey from the Denver Broncos, who's a big-bodied wide receiver, might be used more as a blocker than as a receiver. But I do think their receivers, I would say, are better than decent as a group. Obviously, solid running back with Tyrone Tracy, solid backup in Devin Singletary, promising tight end, as David says, in Theo Johnson, good second and third tight ends in Chris Manhertz and Daniel Bellinger. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll indicated a number of times throughout the offseason, excuse me, that they believe that the quarterback play can really raise the level of the roster and the level of play on offense. That's what they're banking on. They're banking on Russell Wilson to be better than what they had at quarterback for the last 2 years, with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock and Tyrod Taylor and Tim Boyle and Tommy DeVito. And I think they will get better play from Russell Wilson. The question will be how much better. In terms of a young quarterback being successful, I don't think the issue is the surrounding cast on offense. I think the issue is putting the kind of pressure to turn a franchise around that's gone 3-14 in 2024, 9 in 2025, the last 2 off seasons, with a GM and a head coach who are admittedly, in John Mara's words, admittedly on the hot seat. That's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie quarterback walking in the door, because that head coach, Brian Daboll, is going to be coaching for his job. And he's going to want to and need to win football games. I think you feel more comfortable with a veteran quarterback under that circumstance. So I don't necessarily see it as because of the talent surrounding the quarterback. I see it more as the situation that the Giants are in organizationally as to why I like the idea of going with a veteran quarterback. Look, if the Giants love Shedeur Sanders and want to draft him, I don't think having Russell Wilson on the roster on a 1-year contract stops them from doing that. I personally would not do it if I was Joe Shane. I am not that much in love with Shedeur Sanders. I don't think there's that much difference from Shedeur Sanders to Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck. If you can get one of those guys a little bit later on. I might be happy with a flyer on Jalen Milroe, although I think that's a longer term project, and I'm not sure Brian Daboll has time for that. But I don't. My reasoning, I guess, is not the same as Tiki's is. I think if the Giants feel good about a rookie quarterback, they should draft him. Just don't hand him the keys to the franchise week one and expect him to be the guy that turns the franchise around right away. I don't think there's a Jaden Daniels in this class. All right, let's get to a second question. And John Armbruster, speaking of Shadur Sanders, John wants to know, say the Giants draft Shadur or another rookie somewhere in the first round. The Giants will have three quarterbacks then, and fans will be screaming, play Russell, play Jameis, play the rookie. Uh, excuse me. John's question basically is, what if a playoff contending team loses its starting quarterback? Could Wilson or Winston be a possible trade piece in return for a high 2026 draft choice like a first round pick? Look, John, I suppose that it's possible that Russell Wilson could be a trade piece, could be a guy that if he's playing well, could be a guy that teams would look at and ask the Giants if they would be willing to trade Russell Wilson. But nobody's giving up a first round draft pick for Russell Wilson. He's 37 years old. He's on a 1-year contract. Any team that would acquire him would be renting him for the duration of the 2025 season. You're not giving up a first round pick to do that. So you might not even be giving up a day 2 pick to do that. The way trades work in the NFL, you quite often don't get the value for players that you think you would get. In terms of Jameis Winston, I can't imagine anybody, banging the drum or banging down the Giants' door to try to trade anything except maybe a conditional 7th round pick for Jameis Winston. So I don't think you're going to see the Giants trading away quarterbacks during the 2025 season. Like I said, Russell Wilson, maybe if you get, a mid-round offer and you're comfortable at that point that whatever rookie that you've brought into the system is ready or close to ready to play, at an NFL level. But to think that the Giants could get a first round draft choice or even a high second round draft choice in exchange for Russell Wilson is shooting way too high. Apologize, folks, if you've watched some of my recent shows. You know that I haven't been feeling great lately. I still have a cough. I still have a sniffle. Still have a bit of a sinus infection here. So we're working our way through it. So a little drink here and a little cough there is just something that's unavoidable for me at this point. So, but we'll just we'll keep right on going here. Thomas Boyhan wants to know, excluding Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders, which other quarterback do you think would be best for the Giants? Other quarterback in the draft, of course, is what Thomas is asking about. Look, if the Giants want to draft Shadur Sanders, like I said earlier, fine. That's what they want to do. If their assessment of Shadur Sanders is that he's worthy of the number 3 overall pick and he can be their franchise quarterback of the future, Joe Shane, Brian Daboll, Brandon Brown, Dennis Hickey, Tim McDonald, Chris Rossetti, all of those guys in the Giants front office, they know more football than I do. They know more about scouting. They have more access to information. They have access to more people than I ever will. I'm not a big Shadur Sanders guy. I'm just not. So that's always going to be a lens that I answer any of these questions through. If the Giants judge Sanders to be worthy of the third pick, then fine. I will trust their judgment and we'll see what happens. But for me, Thomas, in terms of the remaining quarterbacks in the class, I'm a fan of two guys in particular. I'm a fan of Jackson Dart, and I'm a fan of Tyler Shuck of Louisville. I'm a fan of Jackson Dart because when you watch the tape, you see the talent. Yes, you see that he runs a somewhat simplified, Lane Kiffin offense where everything is really spread out. It's not the type of offense you'd be running in the NFL. But when you watch Dart, you see NFL throws, you see NFL caliber throws, you see instances of him not just playing what I call catch and release football, where he catches it and throws it, you know, exactly where Lane Kiffin is telling him to throw the football. You see instances of him going through progressions, looking for a second and a third read. You see instances of him throwing receivers open. You see him using his legs to make plays. And one of the other reasons why I'm a fan of Jackson Dart is I'm old school enough to still believe in some of the old Bill Parcells rules about quarterbacks, which include number of starts. And Jackson Dart is has two things going for him here. He is the youngest of all of these quarterbacks at the top of the draft class between Cam Ward, Sanders, Tyler Shuck, Jason Milroe, Kyle McCord, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, Riley Leonard, all of those guys. Dart is the youngest. Yet Dart still has, I believe it's more than 40 starts to his credit at the college level, which is a lot of experience. So he already has a lot of game action under his belt, and yet he is still young enough to continue to develop. And as our draft analyst at Big Blue View, Chris Flum, has pointed out to me very recently, in his time in college, Jackson Dart has gotten significantly better in each season. So I don't think he's a finished product. I don't think that what you see now is necessarily what you're going to get. So I'm a big Jackson Dart fan. I'm also a big Tyler Shuck fan. And I think I've said this before. Yes, Tyler Shuck has been in college for 7 years. Yes, he's had a lot of injuries. Yes, he'll be 26 years old next season. But when I look at Tyler Shuck, the only quarterback I clearly put above Tyler Shuck in terms of talent, in terms of arm talent, in terms of the throws he can make, the only quarterback in this class I put above Tyler Shuck simply on talent and on the film that I've seen is Cam Ward. So for me, excuse me again, talent wise, Tyler Shuck is QB2. Now, you of course have to factor in his age. You of course have to factor in his injury history. You have to factor in all of those things. If you're an NFL team, you have to look at it and say, Tyler Shuck says he's the most pro-ready quarterback, but is he already what he's always going to be, or is there still room for him to get better? You wonder about that with a guy who's going to be 26 during the 2025 season. So there are questions, but I really like where the kid is right now. And I would be fine with Tyler Shuck on day 2 if the Giants could land him on day 2. The other one that we talk about a lot is Jalen Milroe, and I think Jalen Milroe is the biggest risk reward quarterback in the class. He could be great, but he could be Anthony Richardson, Jamarcus Russell, Vince Young. He could be, he could bomb out. So you just don't know. And I don't know that Brian Dable and Joe Shane, where they are in year 4 with some pressure on them. I don't know that Jalen Milroe is the right quarterback for them. Maybe Russell Wilson increases the likelihood of them picking someone like Jalen Milroe, but I'm still not sure that Jalen Milroe is the right quarterback for the Giants to try to build a future around, just because I'm not sure Brian Dable has the time with 1 year to really prove his worth and to really get the Giants turned around in a year where he has to win games. I'm not sure that Jalen Milroe is the right investment for the Giants to make. Moving on here, Gary Seams asks, he says, it seems this year the Giants really made moves for depth on both lines in free agency. Is that due to salary cap flexibility or a change in approach by the GM? It's something they haven't really done in the past. So Gary wants to know why it took a few years for Joe Shane to really come to this strategy, this philosophy. Gary, in all honesty, I'm right there with you, asking asking the same question. What took you so long, Joe? It really is, for me, going all the way back to the days of George Young. It is incumbent on any general manager, any team, to continually funnel resources into the offensive and defensive lines. And on the offensive line, Joe Shane has tried to do that. But on the offensive line, he's drafted 4 players in his first 3 drafts, and only one of those, John Michael Schmitz, starting center for the Giants, is at least a serviceable or better than serviceable NFL player. And Josh Azudu, Evan Neal, and Marcus McKethan, have not really given the Giants anything. So he's 1 for 4 in that. He did sign some good free agents last year. I give him credit for building out the line with some veteran free agents. And the line, to me, as I've said earlier, is at least adequate when it's healthy at this point. I think some of the depth signings that the Giants made this free agent period will help there as well. On the defensive line, I've been critical of Joe because I don't think he's funneled enough resources into the defensive line. After losing Leonard Williams via trade, after losing A'Shawn Robinson via free agency last offseason, Joe added nothing to the defensive line. Giants got lucky finding Elijah Chapman, undrafted free agent, and he did give them a little bit, but they didn't add anything in free agency last offseason. They didn't draft a defensive lineman. Joe has never used more than a 5th-round draft pick on a defensive lineman, and that 5th-round pick was DJ Davidson, who really is he's just a guy. He's what's commonly referred to as a jag. He's okay for a few snaps, but he's nothing great. So, and the biggest free agent that Joe Shane has ever signed is Rakeem Nunez-Roches, who is, by all rights, a rotational defensive tackle, should be a 3rd or 4th guy, should be playing 30 to 40% of defensive snaps rather than 60 or 70% of defensive snaps, which is what he played a year ago. I think that Joe recognized, at least his free agency work, signing, some depth pieces on both sides shows me that he did recognize that that's an area that's been neglected. I would hope that both sides, both lines get addressed fairly early in the draft as well, maybe even with multiple picks on one side of the ball or the other. So, you know, I think it's an area where the Giants have to do better, and what we have seen so far in free agency tells me that the Giants recognize that as well. One last question before we wrap it up today. Brian Altman wants to know: is the combination of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter plus Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck superior to Shadur Sanders at number 3 and someone else at number 34? Obviously, we can't really say who that might be because we don't have any idea who the first 33 picks are going to be. Brian, for me, I think you guys know the answer. For me, it's Carter Hunter and then getting the quarterback that you want out of that next group, Dart, Milroe, Shuck. The problem becomes, can you get the guy that you want? Because you're probably not going to be able to sit there at number 34 and get Jackson Dart. Talked to a couple of people recently who think that Jackson Dart probably doesn't get out of the top 15. So if you take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, then you have to figure out, do you have enough in terms of draft capital to go back up into the top 12, maybe get to number 9 where the New Orleans Saints are, and trade up? Can you afford to give up the amount of assets necessary to go back and get Jackson Dart? And is that worth it? Is it worth it to do that for Tyler Shuck? If you look at Jalen Milroe as a long-term project, can you sit there at 34 and get him? So I think the problem becomes what you, in the Carter Hunter plus Dart Milroe Shuck scenario, I think you also have to factor in how much you're going to have to give up to move up and get one of those guys. You might even have to move up into the late part of round 1 to get Tyler Shuck. There's a lot of people thinking that quarterback needy teams who might consider him on day 2 might be willing to trade into the tail end of round 1 to grab him and get the 5th-year option on his contract, which is really valuable when it comes to the quarterback position. So it becomes a question of what you have to give up to go get one of those guys. That has to be factored in. Given my choice, on the face of it, I would take Carter Hunter plus Dart or Tyler Shuck over Sanders, and whatever happens to fall to number 34 in terms of an offensive lineman or a defensive tackle or something like that. So that's my preference. But again, you have to factor in what it's going to take to get that quarterback, if you go with best player available at number 3. Anyway, Giants fans, I think that's a good spot for us to wrap it up. Appreciate your support and appreciate you guys spending time watching the show. So thank you as always. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.